Hey Dog Nation, I'm Brandon Adams. This is a very special Signing Day Special presented by Kroger. Reacting to some big news a moment ago as four-star wide receiver Arian Smith chose the Georgia Bulldogs over the Alabama Crimson Tide in a ceremony there in his high school there in Lakeland, Florida. So a big deal here for Georgia to get really something that's a huge position of need. Obviously, Georgia not only needs wide receivers, but it needs speedy receivers. Smith, arguably the fastest player in all of college football, or I should say high school football, here for the 2020 class, and now he is going to be a Georgia Bulldog. It was interesting watching the ceremony that took place on the ESPNU television cameras just a couple of minutes ago in talking about why it was he chose Georgia. Smith talked about feeling comfortable overall with the program, but in addition to that, he also talked about that he really felt like he was able to provide something that Georgia needs, making the comparison to McCole Hardman, saying that Georgia needs someone that can take kick returns, punt returns, back to the crib, as he called it. So Smith sees that opportunity at Georgia to step in as that speedy wide receiver, potentially playing right away. That's something that he also mentioned a moment ago, and really being able to contribute to Georgia as both a special teams and as a receiver, very much the role that Hardman once occupied for UGA, a role that Georgia was arguably without here during the 2019 season, given the fact that Georgia struggled to receiver position, those dynamic, explosive plays. For the most part, Georgia hasn't had those. McCole Hardman's obviously made a pretty big name for himself in his rookie year as part of the Kansas City Chiefs. The work that he's been able to do as part of Andy Reid's offense with Pat Mahomes there. And now that brand that Hardman has established for himself, other Georgia guys now potentially wanting to follow in those footsteps. One of those guys will be Arian Smith. It was interesting to see a little bit of a wardrobe malfunction almost with Smith as he was revealing his Georgia shirt, but it was very cool to see the jacket that he was wearing, at least the best that I can tell, with the American flag right there on the crest. Maybe a throwback to the Pan Am team that Smith was a part of. He is, in addition to being a very good football player, a world-class sprinter, as Jeff Sintel has told us, and we'll try to get Jeff here at the desk in a couple of minutes when he's freed up from his reporting duties to give some more thoughts on Arian Smith. But Smith is a kind of world-class sprinter, good friends with Matthew Bowling, and the kind of guy that would be a competitor for Georgia in its burgeoning track program as well, in addition to what he's going to do on the football field. So if you're just joining us, here is the big news. Georgia has landed a big commit. One of the battles that Georgia expected to wage today was for Arian Smith. Two hats there on the table, the Georgia hat, the Alabama hat. Neither, by the way, was the flat bill variety. You know, a little earlier we did see C.J. Stroud choose Ohio State over Georgia, going with the flat-billed Buckeyes hat as his way of signifying his choice. For the two hats in front of Smith, they were both the curved variety, both Nike hats, and it's the Nike hat of the Georgia Bulldogs that ultimately gets chosen there over the Alabama Crimson Tide, so the Dogs pick up a big win. Let me take a couple of minutes here to kind of let you sound off on this on both Facebook and YouTube. We'll try to squeeze in some Twitter comments as well, and hopefully we'll get a chance to speak to Jeff Sintel here in just a moment too. It's our signing day coverage. It's brought to you by Kroger, a commitment special here. Don't forget, we'll be also live covering the announcement. You get a chance to see that right here in our Dog Nation video channel airwaves. Really just a few minutes from now when five-star defensive lineman Jordan Burch makes his decision. But ahead of that, some more good news for UGA fans to celebrate. Arian Smith joining the fold, becoming a dog here. On Facebook, we'll find out what some folks have to say about this on the heels of the announcement. Tyler Brooks saying it's a big commitment for Georgia. It is. Matt Talley giving you a boom, and that's certainly a really good celebration today. The kind of guy that can be an impact, potentially play right away guy. The kind of guy that really gives Georgia something that it didn't have a lot of with its receiving situation this year, a lot of speed, and really Smith is able to pair that speed with actually a pretty good overall physical profile there as well. So this is a pretty impressive prospect he was able to bring in, that Georgia was able to bring in. Brad Cassidy says he knows he comes in and immediately impacts Georgia's offense. That's certainly something that Smith alluded to on the ESPNU a moment ago, and that's obviously what Georgia's hopeful for here. It needs a drastic upgrade at receiver. Smith alone won't necessarily provide that, but part of what Smith brings to the table certainly gives Georgia a chance for that. Alton McGurk says potentially a return guy day one. Certainly should be and could be. That's certainly a possibility. Nigel Combs feeling pretty good about it. Marvin Fairley also liking the idea of Arian Smith as a possible returner there as well. John William Adams mentions that too. John Arena, though, focuses in on more on the offensive side of this, saying that Georgia needs someone to blow the top off of defenses. And that's probably something that Georgia just didn't have quite enough of this year. Probably was not able to extend those defenses vertically enough. And part of that was, and Kirby Smart even talked about this pretty candidly, at the conclusion of the SEC championship game, that you've got to have receivers who can get open. And against that tough press coverage that you see on a regular basis in the SEC, part of the way that you do that is obviously with some physicality line of scrimmage, but the biggest part of that is oftentimes running away from defensive backs and really giving that separation that makes it easy for a quarterback to find you. It's one of the ways that a receiver can help build trust with his quarterback by creating that significant separation. And Smith's got the speed to potentially be able to do that. It's a name that we've heard kind of a lot of growing momentum with Georgia a bit lately, and it kind of shows up here in a big way. Part of our Kroger commitment special as four-star wide receiver Arian Smith has chosen the Georgia Bulldogs. We'll go to YouTube. We'll get some comments over here. K9 Blues on the subject of C.J. Stroud, who a little earlier, the four-star quarterback from Rancho Cucamonga, California, he did choose Ohio State over Georgia. There had been kind of some late rumblings where I think we came into our Dog Nation World Headquarters studios this morning thinking, hey, maybe Georgia's kind of more in the mix for Stroud than I expected them to be. Ultimately, the decision probably went the way that I predicted that it would go, but I think over the last 24 hours, there was some reason to think, maybe that's not necessarily going to be the case. Maybe Georgia really is making this strong late push here to add a second quarterback to the 2020 class. That's the other big news that's going to come in today, in addition to the expected signings, which Georgia has now gotten all of, in addition to some other names they're waiting on, maybe more prominently among that list. Jordan Burch, the five-star defensive lineman, who'll show up around 2:30 or so this afternoon. We'll have live video coverage on the Dog Nation video channels. But Stroud, I think Georgia was a real player in this, and ultimately he chose to wait behind Justin Fields for a year, what I presume to be a year, and then have a chance to compete for the starting quarterback role there in Columbus, Ohio. So Georgia misses out on the quarterback, but does pick up the receiver, C.J. Stroud. RT367 on YouTube says, I'm here to celebrate. And I think that if you're a Georgia fan, Arian Smith certainly gives you a real big reason to celebrate. I think this is absolutely a name worth celebrating here. K9 Blues also mentioning Caleb Williams as a target for the 2021 class. For the future quarterbacks of Georgia, Williams will continue to be one of those big names that Georgia's watching. Eric Smith says, you add Arian Smith with Marcus Rosemy and Justin Robinson. He says, can I have another? And yeah, listen, already what Georgia's doing in terms of its recruiting work for its 2020 recruiting class, adding some really nice names in that mix, and Arian Smith is a big one. In a few hours, Georgia will also hope to hear some good news on Jermaine Burton, too. So, yeah, pretty good stuff here so far. Devin Glenn feeling like Georgia really needs Jermaine Burton, and I think a lot of Georgia fans would probably agree with that. Green Soldier also says that he thinks Arian Smith is an amazing get for Kirby Smart. I think it's a sign of a changing dynamic for UGA's offensive woes, and it could very well be. And I don't think it's too strong of a word to say that Georgia did face some offensive woes this season. And some of that is obviously at the receiver position, and the way that you get better is by bringing in more and better bodies to help combat that situation. And Arian Smith is definitely one of those guys. Green Soldier, I agree with you. ENT on YouTube also mentioning the fact that LSU's lost at least one key recruit today. Kind of a surprising scenario. Five-star wide receiver Raheem Jarrett, who I think on Twitter this week had said he wasn't going to be signing anywhere during the early signing period, going to be postponing, and now has announced his pledge to Maryland. So a little bit of a surprise there. As you can see and tell, our buddy Jeff Sintel has joined us here as Georgia has added four-star receiver Arian Smith. Jeff, number 72 player in the 24/7 Sports Composite. As you've said and written many times, one of the fastest players in all of high school football for this 2019 season, class of 2020. A guy who seems pretty comfortable with comparisons to McCole Hardman, both as a receiver and as a potential kick returner. What should Georgia fans like about Arian Smith?
Well, first of all, we got to add some color or some humility to everything, Brandon, today. And I think I found one thing in this world that you and I and maybe a lot of Dog Nation can do faster than Arian Smith. That's taking off a jacket.
Yeah, a little bit of a wardrobe malfunction for Smith. You hate that for him there in that moment. He's trying to get it unzipped so he could show off the Georgia D. You hate the fact that he wasn't able to, kind of get that done. But still really cool to see him with the American flag insignia. I'm assuming that was one of the jackets that he got as part of being a part of the Pan Am team. He was obviously on a tremendous 4x100 relay team. So I'm assuming that jacket was somehow significant in part of the gear that he got as a part of being a part of that. This is that sort of world-class sprinter type guy, and if the jacket wouldn't quite come unzipped, still cool to see him wearing it. Still cool to see that American flag represented by Smith there as he showed the world another pretty prominent insignia. That's the Georgia G as well. Two things you can't go wrong with: Old Glory and the Power G. Together in the same picture when it's a recruit committing and then signing, that's a thumbs up for me.
Did he have you at hello with that one?
He did, very much so.
So first things first, Arian Smith, that Pan Am team, you remember that was with Matthew Bowling, the Georgia fabulous freshman. They ran together 38.62, and folks, 10.31 in the 100 meters. That's as fast as anybody that Kirby Smart has brought into the program. That's faster than Tyreek Stevenson. That's faster than Tyson Campbell. That's faster than all these fast guys that Georgia has brought in of late to be a part of the Georgia football program. That's just rare, world-class speed for somebody under 20 years of age. He's going to run track at Georgia as well. I think the main thing here with Arian Smith, I don't care if he catches 50 balls next year, he catches 30 balls, he catches 11 balls next year. When you put him on the field and you have him out wide and you tell him to run the ball, run a deep 9 route, a go route, then SEC defensive coordinators, if they're worth their headsets, they're going to put a safety over the top of that guy, because all of a sudden Georgia now has an athlete at receiver that they can't hang with in man coverage, that they can basically throw the 9 route and see how far he can go get it. And just the fear factor there that Arian Smith puts on the field keeps those safeties out of the box, and it makes Georgia's run game a whole lot better. Arian Smith is a guy that was consistently recruited hard by Georgia out of Lakeland Senior High School. And one of those stories we wrote, Brandon, after the SEC championship game about where LSU kind of outclassed Georgia or outranked Georgia or outflanked Georgia at receiver was definitely the elite prospects that they brought in. Those top 100 guys they brought in to play the receiver position. Now Georgia has George Pickens. Now Georgia has Demetrius Robertson. Now Georgia has Arian Smith. Now Georgia has Dominic Blaylock. That room of those elite guys that can usually get by man coverage, that can win contested catches and can beat man coverage and get separation. Arian Smith has instant separation. I think one of my favorite highlights on his film, Brandon, was not one of him catching a ball or catching a bubble screen and going down the field. It's where he totally erased a man's angle and he chased down a guy and caught him at the goal line to prevent a touchdown.
Jared Posdel, on a different subject in our Facebook comment section, says the Stroud situation, C.J. Stroud choosing Ohio State over Georgia a couple of minutes ago, same for Ohio State and Fromm State. He says, I like Carson Beck. Quicker than Stroud, already had an NCAA body profile. So I guess let me let you do this in kind of however form you want to. A comment on C.J. Stroud choosing Ohio State over Georgia and kind of where that leaves the Dogs' quarterback situation, with Beck obviously already in the fold and in the mix on his way to campus to be a part of some of these bowl practices. Where does it leave Georgia not getting C.J. Stroud a moment ago?
Yeah, so I like Georgia. If they only get one quarterback signing in this class, I know we wrote recruit greedy, you'd want another. Look at Ohio State's situation there, and they now have Justin Fields for just one more season. And then they have a pair of 4-star prospects in Jack Miller out of Arizona. And now C.J. Stroud, the nation's #2 pro-style quarterback, backing up Justin, learning from Justin, continuing that lineage now from J.T. Barrett, Cordell Jones, to Dwayne Haskins, to Justin Fields. And now they got the winner of the Elite 11 contest. That means Ohio State will have 2 Elite 11 MVPs there in their program there for the 2020 season. But you know what, folks? I like Beck a lot. I think Beck is a guy that you're going to see me write about him a lot in the next couple of days, because there's one more story about Carson Beck that I think you folks need to read about and learn about. Carson Beck, even if C.J. Stroud would have picked Georgia today, he would have nodded his head and said, fine, that's great for the program, great for the room, great for the depth for Georgia at the quarterback spot beyond Dwayne Mathis, beyond Jake Fromm. Dwan Mathis, excuse me. But he was going to put his head down and go and say, you know what, best man win. I'm going to get him, make him better. I'm going to work. But, you know, Carson Beck is a guy that brings a lot to the table. He's been through some adversity in his life, his personal life, and even his work as a quarterback. He's been on the top of the mountain, and then he's been a guy that had to play quarterback his senior year with not a lot of weapons around him, and kind of had to make it do what it do by check downs and running around and making guys miss. Huge fan of Carson Beck in this Georgia class. think he's going to do good things for the Bulldogs. It's just a matter of when.
Can we do a couple rapid-fire things here for a moment? Neil Adams on Facebook mentioning Jordan Burch. We will have live video coverage of Burch's announcement coming up. We're really inside of an hour from doing that. So anything to say about Burch before we kind of head to Columbia in a little bit and see that announcement live? Any kind of predictions or insight you want to give us on Burch?
I think we always kind of offer up the thing, follow the visits. And he's visited Georgia more than any other school. I think I can count up 6 times that he's visited Georgia. So should he not choose Georgia, I think the staff would have done everything it possibly could to turn his eye and to gain his commitment. But I think Eddie the Blind Squirrel is somewhere below this new fancy anchor desk you got right now. And I hear him chirping, Georgia, Burch, Georgia, Burch. You know, Brandon, I just think there's a great fit there at Georgia. LSU is obviously the prettiest Miss America type beauty pageant winner right now among college football's elite. I think that's just a little too far away from home for Jordan Burch. And listen, keep saying this a lot. If anybody knows and says, I know exactly where Jordan Burch is going to go, unless it's Eddie the Blind Squirrel, I think they're pulling your leg right there, because this is one of the most mysterious commitments, one of those most mysterious signing day decisions, processes, timelines that I've ever been around.
Sean Shannon asked a good question about what's it like for Jermaine Burton right now ahead of his announcement, which I believe is at 3:30 Eastern time, just given the fact that LSU lost receiver today. Raheem Jarrett surprisingly chose Maryland. You know, is there now more pressure on Burton to stick with his LSU choice, given the fact that LSU is now down a receiver that it thought it was going to be? You know, are they able to either side able to contact Burton right now?
Oh, yeah.
What's it like for him leading into that 3:30 announcement?
Well, I would imagine there was a lot of late night calls and late night texts and DMs and group text chat threads among Georgia commitments to Burton, but also maybe among LSU commitments to Burton. I think he's a great missing piece for Georgia. I think, you know, when folks start right now in the middle of the day, this is when all the news is going to happen. Of course, Kobe Wilson chose Temple, the chance to be a star there from Parkview. He was that very late offer who did have the ability to sign papers with Georgia today. Then you have C.J. Stroud choosing to join Ryan Day in that Buckeyes program. Now Georgia gets a big win, gets its 17th commitment of the class, public commitment of the class, and we've got Arian Smith, and it still keeps Georgia number 6 overall in the country with a chance to move up with some last-minute decisions. I think right now most folks are wondering how you're going to frame up this Georgia class, and I think the next 2 decisions, Jermaine Burton at 3:30 and then Jordan Burch at 2:30, are going a long way towards determining if there's a lot of excitement level for Georgia. I simply look at it this way. I can go ahead and preview what I'm going to think. I think any combination of one of the next 2 signees, if Georgia gets Jordan Burch or Georgia gets Jermaine Burton, I think you've got to call this a big win for Georgia on the 2020 first day of the early signing period, simply because Georgia will radically change its wide receiver room with another top 100 prospect, or it will land a 5-star defensive end in Jordan Burch.
We'll be on the air from Columbia around 2:15 p.m., so we're about 45 minutes away from that. Let me do one more thing on Arian Smith, though, before we let you get back to work here. Steve Garnett on the Facebook comment section, we made the comparison between Smith and McCole Hardman, but Steve also makes the comparison between Arian Smith and another very speedy guy, that's Demetrius Robertson. And admittedly, I don't know that Georgia has always used Robertson as well as it could, and some of that's probably to be blamed on Robertson, some of that's probably to be blamed on the way that maybe Georgia has used him. But that's an example of a speedy guy that Georgia kind of left in that slot position where I don't think that always takes advantage of a receiver's true speed. Do you see Arian Smith more capable of playing on the outside for Georgia where he does get a chance to run? We just sort of typically think of the outside receivers getting a chance to run the deepest routes. Do you see Smith at Georgia as more of an outside receiver? Because that's obviously, to me, the best way to take advantage of the blazing speed that he has.
I see him all over this scheme. I see it as a great new toy for offensive coordinator James Coley to work with. I see the bubble screens. I see perhaps the quick slants where you're getting the balls, the quick routes where you're getting the ball in Arian Smith's hands, and I see him as a jet sweep guy too as well, Brandon. Here's a difference, though, and I'm going to tell you guys about the difference between very good speed, 5-star speed, and then elite world-class track speed. I've got the numbers in my head rolling through Demetrius Robertson as a high school senior in the 100-meter dash, and Brandon, those are about 10.7, 10.75, 10 low 6.7. You're talking about Arian Smith in his junior year before his senior season, and he's not an early enrollee, folks, but he's already putting up 10.31s. You want to think about that Georgia jet sweep. Imagine where Tyler Simmons was, or imagine where a James Cook was, or imagine where a D-Rob was coming around on the jet sweep. And you can legitimately think that Arian Smith is a step or two faster than all those guys. 10.31. It looks like when you get Arian Smith for 3 years in the Georgia track program as well as the strength and conditioning program, this is a guy that could show up at the NFL Combine in about 3 or 4 years, and he could smoke a 4.29, 4.28 type 40-yard dash.
Let me remind you, it's our Kroger Early Signing Day Commitment Special. 4-star wide receiver Arian Smith has made his pledge and will sign with the Georgia Bulldogs. Big news here. We're going to be live in just a few minutes to cover 5-star defensive lineman Jordan Birch. We'll have coverage for Jermaine Burton's decision later on, too. So we're all over here today. We really appreciate Kroger making it all possible. And don't forget, still a couple more opportunities for you to be at a Kroger here in the North Georgia area to see the legendary former coach and athletic director Vince Dooley. Today in Bon Air, Georgia. It's tomorrow at the Kroger in Cumming, and then closing out at the Kroger in Woodstock on Friday. So let me give you these dates and times one more time. 5 to 6 p.m. each of the next 3 days. Today, it's 774 Georgia Highway 96 in Bon Air. Tomorrow, 5550 Bethel View Road in Cumming. And then Friday, 2295 Town Lake Parkway in Woodstock. The legendary former coach and athletic director Vince Dooley finishing up his tour of some Krogers, signing copies of many of his great books. Your chance to meet him and get a great gift for somebody in your list. That's at Kroger. Bon Air today, Cumming tomorrow, Woodstock on Friday. It's a Kroger commitment special. Arian Smith is in the fold. Dog fans can't wait to see who's coming next. We'll be back to cover it for you right here on the Dog Nation video channels. We'll look forward to speaking to you then.